Hey, everybody, we're getting canceled. So today we are going to talk about something going on in the news. We're going to talk about what people are kind of missing about it. So, for those of you who don't know, there was a recent Twitter blow up between conservative columnist Matt Walsh, who writes for the Daily Wire, and Congresswoman AOC, Alexnadria Ocasio Cortez. Um, AOC had posted about the conditions that her grandmother was living in Puerto Rico, and showing that there was a leaky roof. There were some problems with that, and that the government, particularly the Trump government, even though Biden is currently president, so I'm not sure how that works. But again, I'm a Canadian, so what do I know about these things? But apparently, it was a failure of the government that her grandmother was living in these conditions. To which Matt Walsh pointed out, hey, aren't you a wealthy government official? Don't you make a decent amount of money, live in a nice place, have just bought yourself a nice $70,000 Tesla? But said, you know what? We're going to start a GoFundMe to raise money for your grandmother, which raised, I believe, roughly around $100,000 before it got canceled. Now, there's been a lot of debate over what is the purpose of doing this? Is this bad? Is this good? Um, People complaining that why aren't you raising funds for other people in Puerto Rico who are suffering, or shouldn't the government be doing better? And you can have those debates whether this, and is this just a game tactic, a stunt being pulled by Matt Walsh? And of course, it is. But it points out two things, and one of them I think everyone is starting to understand. The other one I think not many people are talking about. And I'll focus more on the second one, but let's touch on the first one here. So the first one is philosophical difference between people on the political left and people on the political right. So people on the political left tend to believe that the government is there to help solve problems. People on the right prefer more voluntary contributions. So this is why you see on the left, raise taxes on the rich, everybody contribute their fair share and help build, roads, society, social programs. And on the right, why don't we have charities and voluntary contributions? So the one thing that is obvious here is you have AOC, who has money of her own, and you have Matt Walsh raising money through charity donations, saying, well, shouldn't the government be doing this? And, Matt Walsh with his charity drive saying, well, hey, couldn't we solve this problem another way? Fair argument. But here's one thing I think that is missing out of all this, and that's GoFundMe. So GoFundMe is a platform where people can fund certain causes that they want to support. And this didn't exist many, many years ago. Obviously pre-internet, this wouldn't have even been possible. So you would need certain government programs to fund things like this. That would be the only way you could do it. Or you could get charity organizations. But again, even then, soliciting donations was very difficult back then. You'd have to, have campaigns and phone drives or mailing campaigns, things like that. Whereas now, somebody can just tweet a GoFundMe campaign and raise a bunch of money, which raises an interesting question, because if you can do that for something like this, why can't we do that for other things? So, for example, government often has a whole bunch of programs which add many, many layers of bureaucracy. And there's red tape, there's regulations, there's all this sort of stuff that prevents things from actually happening. Even basic charities have a lot of overhead. A lot of charity expenses go towards the people who run the charities, that go towards awareness campaigns. So we have to ask ourselves, well, how much of these things can actually just be put to platforms like GoFundMe? It doesn't have to be specifically GoFundMe, but this concept. So we have political parties and politicians fighting over what we're going to fund, and can we get this through this particular government body, let's say the Senate. We have in the US, there's the Senate, and there's the whole reconciliation and budgeting and all that sort of stuff. Well, why don't they just take some of these things and say, well, rather than fight through this political red tape and this political process, why don't we just create a government-style GoFundMe? Do you want to fund this project, citizens? And separate from the taxes that are collected, you could contribute to this. And this would allow very, very wealthy people who go around and virtue signal about how they should pay more taxes the opportunity to say, hey, I will pay more than this. I will pay specifically towards this cause. And, we'll do that for charities that already exist and fund those charitable organizations. But we now have the opportunity, because we have the technology, to actually do direct action, to say, look, I want to fund specifically this thing. I want to fund specifically this person or this business. And this is an interesting thing that we're seeing in the way that money moves that is changing. And I don't think people are aware that this is happening yet, but it's happening. So another example that I'm going to throw in here as just another interesting twist on how things are happening is, if you've been following the stock market at all, there's been the rise of the Wall Street bets stocks. This is the AMC, the GameStop stocks, which has caused a lot of crazy furor as the stock prices rise up as people pour in to support companies. And this is another example of where the technology is enabling money to flow in different ways, that we don't need the typical ways in which money would flow through government, through taxations, or through business products, or investor rounds, that you can actually go straight to the people. So the key catchphrase of the GameStop movement originally was, "We like the stock." And that's right. Like, people can put money in whatever stock they want now that we have tools like Robinhood, or here in Canada, Wealthsimple, that allows people to trade stocks at low fees, and anybody can get in. You don't have to be in a certain wealth group. You don't have to have a certain amount of money. You can contribute whatever you want. And we also see this in cryptocurrencies as well. And so this is this general idea that we can start decentralizing a lot of authority, and the technology is arriving that is allowing this to happen. And the thing I think people miss is this is going to be society shifting. Again, if governments can embrace platforms that allow people to fund the causes that they want within the government, then the government doesn't have to do those things anymore. The people can do them. Why does the government have to do this? Like, why does the government have to fund relief for Puerto Rico when the people can just give money to Puerto Rico and give it directly to Puerto Ricans? It's entirely possible, right? That this can be solved without the government. That doesn't say, oh, go and eliminate all the government programs and all that sort of stuff, the typical kind of libertarian, get rid of government sort of thing, because maybe there is still a role for that. But the role is different than it used to be, where it had to be this before. Now the question is, well, does it have to be these things? Can we ask these questions? And not only, like, it doesn't have to be literally GoFundMe or Indiegogo or any of these other platforms. Is, why isn't the government developing its own platform to allow the people to direct where tax funds go to, rather than having to have the whole politicization and the whole process that it goes through? Why don't we have more direct influence from the people? And again, going back to what's going on with GameStop and AMC, is people can fund companies that they just like. Even if the business model isn't great, even if they don't think the revenue for the company is going to be great, maybe you're just nostalgic about GameStop. Or maybe you just really want movie theaters to exist. And so you don't care if the stock goes up, because typically that's it. People are playing the stock market, and it's a little like gambling. We're betting that this stock is going to go up because I think this stock is going to be doing well, or we're going to short the stock because we think the company's garbage and it's going to go down. And of course, that's kind of how the whole GameStop thing got started. But we might start seeing people starting to say, well, you know what? I just like this company. I just like what they do. And I'm not going to look at it as a return on investment, like I'm looking to make money off the stock. Maybe I just really like movie theaters and I want them to exist. So I'm going to give movie theaters money. And stocks can almost become like their own little charity, right? If that business is doing things you like, invest in it, right? If you're into, renewable energy and save the environment stuff, well, then guess what? There's a whole bunch of companies doing that stuff that you can just put money into. And if you don't care, as someone who's investing in these companies, in a return on investment, maybe you just think of it like a charity thing and you just give them the money. That's a very different way for people to invest in stocks. And it's really sending ripples through the stock market because people don't know how to deal with it. How do you deal with a game that changes in this way? Do you regulate it out and try and prevent people from doing this? But why not? It's their money. And if they want to give it to AMC, if they want to give it to GameStop, knowing that it might go to zero, that the business might still go under, even if they all invest. Or perhaps that the stock does shoot up and they do well because it gives the company funding, and the company can actually turn around, and whether they issue more shares to raise money or get further investment, that maybe in the end, it actually ends up saving their business. We don't know. And the thing is, this is going to happen more and more as we go forward because the technology is enabling this decentralization. And so when we enable this decentralization, what else is going to change? Right? We can change, how we fund things. We can change how government operates. We can change how we operate as citizens of countries, which is going to be interesting. Because if you think about that, was there anything in the GoFundMe campaign that would stop anyone from any country from flooding money in there and helping that country out. And again, we have existing charities and ways that do this, but a lot of them, again, have a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape that ends up eating up a lot of the donations. And technology can help streamline that. If you think cryptocurrencies, somebody can directly send a currency at a low fee directly to someone else across the world without having to go through, any major company. Right now there's a lot of middlemen in there that will take fees. And yes, in cryptocurrencies, there are still fees associated with it, and Ethereum has its own problems with gas fees at the moment. But the technology is working to solve those problems. So what happens when everything moves freely like that? I don't know. It could be an interesting thing. So I think that's a little thing that people aren't talking about the Matt Walsh AOC thing, is that, with this decentralization of control, decentralization of money, decentralization of power, is there something that governments can do to actually, instead of trying to solve every problem, just say, hey, we've got this thing that we used to do in the government, and maybe we don't need to do it anymore because technology can do it better. And maybe we just turn that over to the people. Or maybe it changes how we actually allocate tax money or things like that. I don't know. I don't have the answers to any of this stuff. I just know I'm probably getting canceled. Just something to think about. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you later.